Welcome to today's review. I've got one of the more expensive Datejust Homages from AliExpress going up against one of the more affordable options. And yes, this is a newer brand, and yes, it has a kind of funny sounding name, but all that aside, let's jump in, take a closer look at both of these watches side by side. I've been wearing them on a pretty regular basis for the last 3 months or so, and I'll tell you what the experience has been like, and I'd tell you which one of these two that I would pick as a daily driver, and the answer might surprise you. So let's jump in, and the first thing I want to talk about actually is going to be the bracelets. Having a nice Jubilee bracelet is always a pleasure, and on a 36mm oyster style case, there really is nothing better in my opinion. So the bracelet and the quality of the bracelet was really important to me. So let me jump in and show you the San Martin bracelet first, because this one really impressed me. Most brands don't get the details right, but I think San Martin has come pretty close. It has, first of all, the correct style of end links. So it's got the male style end link, but it does not protrude past the case, and it drapes down nicely, so it doesn't add to the lug. The links on this bracelet also articulate really nicely. Here you can see the movement between the links. It's nice and easy, and there's no binding. The links fold over onto themselves like so. And one of the key factors that allows you to do that is the spacing between the links. So if you look on the outer brushed links, you can see the amount of spacing where you can see my finger behind it. And just for comparison, let me bring in the Rmalti and hold it side by side. And here, as you can see, the links on the Rmalti on the left are much closer together, whereas the links on the San Martin are spaced further apart, making the bracelet look a little bit different. It also makes the bracelet drape around the wrist and really hug your wrists a lot more than this style of a Jubilee bracelet link spacing, which is very common. This is really what I have come across on many different watches. This is even what you would see from Seiko if they're doing Jubilee bracelets, and different micro brands, and even the cheap, eBay and AliExpress aftermarket options. They will look much similar to this, although the quality of this is good too. So let me just put this back down and continue on with the San Martin bracelet. So if we zoom in just a bit, here you can see, of course, the outer links are brushed. The center links are polished. All of the links are solid. The brushing quality is good. Polishing quality is also good, except for the fact that the polished links in the center have very noticeably rough edges on the sides, which is a downer because you can definitely feel the roughness when you run your finger across the top. On the other hand, they have finished the underside of the bracelet really nicely. Everything feels nice and smooth. Even the edges on the sides don't feel sharp. This was a very comfortable bracelet to wear. So I covered the end link, the spacing between the links. The next thing that makes it a nearly perfect style of Jubilee bracelet is the taper, right? And they nailed the taper. They've got 20mm tapering down to 16. It does go back up to about 18.5 at the clasp. If this clasp was a bit narrower, it would really be ideal, but at least it does have the 4 micro adjustments, as opposed to a lot of Jubilees that you would see with either less micro adjustments or maybe a butterfly clasp. So San Martin, full points, nearly full points for the bracelet. It's been a joy to wear. In fact, I took it off and tried putting it on a few of my other watches, and unfortunately it didn't fit anything that I tried it on. So that was a little bit disappointing, and the end link is attached to the bracelet, and I believe it's held together with this pin. So when you take off the bracelet, the end link does not separate. But yeah, guys, really nice Jubilee bracelet. And it really surprises me that San Martin is not using this Jubilee bracelet on more of their other watches. I've seen some of their newer watches, and they look like they're using a Jubilee bracelet more similar to this one on the Remulti, which has been known to be like the older style of Jubilee bracelet. And perhaps it's a cost savings thing, but this one, guys, is really nice, and I've never come across a Datejust Homage with this type of a quality Jubilee bracelet with the attention to detail in, for example, the spacing between the links. I think they really nailed it. It's been super comfortable to wear, and of course I'll give you a wrist shot towards the end of the video, so make sure you do stick around for that, and make sure you do subscribe to my channel because I'll be posting a ton of more content. Now, let's compare that with the Remulti bracelet. So unfortunately, it's got the male style end links, so that means it does protrude past the case and adds a significant amount to the lug to lug, although it does taper down. So it doesn't look too bad on the wrist, but definitely noticeable. And again, you'll see it when I do the wrist shots, but you can unfortunately see kind of the sides and the undersides of that first link when you have it on your wrist. So it is very noticeable. This one was also very comfortable to wear. I was almost shocked at this price point that they made a pretty high quality bracelet. And again, I'm not really mentioning the prices because the prices seem to change, especially for Remulti. I've seen these go from anywhere between 170 to about 250. So the prices will definitely depend on when you're buying this. The other thing is this came with the 4 micro adjust clasp, and the clasp looks very similar to the San Martin, but if I hold them side by side, you can see that there is actually a larger spacing between each of the micro adjustment holes on the Remulti as opposed to the San Martin, which the holes are closer, and the closer holes are better because it lets you fine tune the adjustments and get a better fit. This one, it's nice to have the 4, but they're not as close together, so you won't be able to get as as precise of an adjustment. And this one I have banged around a bit, so it's getting scratched up. And this one, again, the quality of the finishing is good. The brushing, the brushed links look like they have a heavier brushing than the San Martins, and the San Martins polished links just seem to reflect light and look like a more expensive bracelet when on the wrist. And that's going to be one of the overall themes, is the San Martin just looks like a more expensive watch on the wrist. And before we move on, one of the things I should have addressed is the Remulti was a special order. I contacted them when I first saw this brand, and I asked for a customized version. So this is essentially a Datejust in the same configuration that they sell their Explorers. So what that means is that they were able to put the Datejust dial in the Explorer case, so it didn't have the fluted bezel, and it uses the crystal without the magnifier. So you could still ask them for it. They did not charge anything additional to do the customization, which was really nice. All right, moving on to the dials now. Both have very nice looking dials. The quality of the San Martin is a little bit better when you're looking at them side by side. And how I come to that conclusion is by looking closely at the applied hour markers. So if you look at those applied indices, hopefully the camera is picking it up, but the indices are thicker on the San Martin, and there is a greater polished area, and they seem to be polished to a shinier finish, for the lack of a better description, so they do reflect light a little bit more than the Rmalti does. The other thing you'll see obviously is the applied logo and on the San Martin. Again, just makes it look a little bit more expensive. The handset is also different. You'll see the hands are longer and have a greater loom application on the San Martin. Again, loom shot towards the end of the video, so stick around. Both of the dates are framed actually, and the San Martin date is framed in like a polished silver type of a frame, which I could do without. I mean, usually on a Rolex, the framing is done the same color in a darker shade as the dial, at least the current models. But that's definitely not a big deal. The other thing is, besides the dial color, which I'll get to, but the dial finish on the San Martin is an enamel finish. And what I've noticed is in this blue color, the color, the shade of this blue is visible in most type of lighting conditions, as opposed to other watches that are perhaps not enamel coated, can look darker or almost black in some conditions. This one looks blue. Even at night when you look at your wrist, you will still see that blue color. It's an odd effect, but it's really kind of neat. And the color, of course, of the Rmalti is the color that I would really want San Martin to start using, is some kind of a champagne color. That's a real downer for the San Martin. They need to have better color options. Some of the classic champagne, silver, white, they need to have more dial options, I think. At the moment, it is very limited, and they're all kind of flashy colors. The Remulti has that nice classic color tone, and it also has that kind of a sunburst finish, which has really nice light play and looks great in outdoor lighting. The Remulti on every level really impressed me with how nicely this watch is done for the price point. And if you're going for a fluted bezel type of a look, of course the San Martin is not going to disappoint. I can't tell you if the Remulti fluted bezel is as nice. The other thing that stands out is the polished case, the all polished case on the San Martin versus the brushed lugs on the Remulti. So again, because of the bezel and the polished case, the San Martin just looks like a kind of a flashier, dressier watch. Polishing quality is really nice, all up to San Martin, usual standards. So it's all polished on the side and all polished on top. I would have loved to have the San Martin with brushed lugs here. That's just a personal preference. But again, all of this bling, and then you've got the nice applied logo, so very nice dressier looking watch. With the Rmalti, you get a slightly different look, right? So you don't have the fluted bezel, and then you have the brushed lugs. So it gives it more of a everyday look, a little bit more casual, although this can also be used in dressy situations. And again, it's got the polished sides. The brushing and polishing is just I would say a step below San Martin, but you really have to have them side by side to even notice it. For what you're paying for the Rmalti, I think they've really crushed it. It's really nicely done as far as the case finishing. The other thing that you'll notice on the case is the crowns. Both are screw-down crowns rated for 100 meters of water resistance. The San Martin one is of course signed with their hex logo. And it's got the PT5000 movement, so of course it's got that nice smooth sweep. Here you can see, which you've probably already noticed. And then the Rmalti has the unsigned crown and the Seiko NH35 movement, which is not as smooth of a sweep. Again, that's part of the reason for the price gap between these two watches. Alright, let's go over the dimensions. So the Rmalti has a 36mm case. I actually measured it at about 35.8. The lug-to-lug on the case itself is just under 44, but with the male end links, it extends that number to 49. So 49mm lug to lug on this guy because of those male style end links. Would have loved to have been able to fit that San Martin bracelet on this, but I tried and it does not fit. The other thing that's quite noticeably different is the thickness. So this one is 12.4mm thick. Still wears quite nicely on the wrist, and I'll put it on in just a moment here. And the bracelet taper on this guy goes from 20 to about 15.5, and the clasp goes back up to about 17.5. Really nicely done clasp here. Another really surprising thing at this price range was a nice clasp with 4 micro adjustments. Clicks in really nicely. Feels nice and secure. And let me put that down and get the San Martin dimensions done. So also 36mm. This one was bang on 36. Lug to lug, which was just under 44. And again, no male style end links here that protrude, which is great. This one is only 11.8mm thick, and that combined with that shorter lug to lug does make this one wear smaller than the Rmalti. So watches with this type of a male end link that protrude will always wear larger, and that is definitely the case between these two watches. And the taper on this one goes from 20 down to 16, and it does taper back up to 18mm at the clasp. Now, the weight is also slightly different. The Rmalti is 115 grams, and the San Martin is 108 grams, and they're both sized for my 6.5-inch wrists. Alright guys, let's take a look at a wrist shot to see how these wear, and then we'll do a loom shot to see how these guys perform. So here is a wrist shot of the Rmalti. Again, my wrists are 6.5 inches. Really have enjoyed wearing this thing, and in fact I have been wearing this one much more than the San Martin. And I just prefer this more versatile dial color, and I actually do prefer the polished bezel as opposed to the fluted bezel. Sorry, let me just get my hand away from the reflection as much as possible. There you go. Love this dial color. Really love this watch overall. Might be one of the best values I've ever bought from AliExpress. Not that I have bought a ton of watches from AliExpress, but this one has been absolutely great. Really worth it if you're looking for the cheapest option with the most bang for the buck. And it does have, of course, I know this is the wrist shot section, but the San Martin does have the narrower lugs, so again it adds to why it wears smaller, whereas the Remulti are a little bit thicker. They have a little bit more of the modern Rolex look. But let me put that down and put the San Martin on. Let's get this out of the way so it doesn't screw up my autofocus. Oddly, this clasp has pinched my arm hairs a few times. I don't know what's going on there, but it seems to catch on the mechanism sometimes. But here it is, guys, and I really love this bracelet. Cannot say enough about how they really nailed the Jubilee style bracelet. And San Martin, if you're listening, you guys got to consider putting this Jubilee style on your other watches. It really is excellent. And I don't know if their GMT has the same one. I've never bought their old GMTs. I know they have the newer 39 and 40mm watches, divers, and the GMTs with the snowflake hands. I don't know the model numbers, but they look like they have the other style of Jubilee bracelet. So here you can see it just really drapes across the wrist, drapes better, and fits smaller than the Remulti, like I said. So there it is, guys, on wrist. Just a beautiful watch. Love that blue color. Really, San Martin killed it with this. They just got to come out with more options. Maybe polished bezel options would be nice, and definitely some additional color options would be great. And here's a loom shot, guys. The San Martin is on the right and the Rmalti is on the left. And this is the initial loom right after it's just been charged. Initially, of course, the hands on the San Martin have better loom. The indices look to be about the same, actually. Hopefully you guys found that review helpful. Now go ahead and please do check out some of my other reviews.